Welcome to the Coffee Snobs podcast, where we just really love good coffee.
So grab your cup of coffee and join us each episode as we explore any and everything coffee related.
From pour-overs to lattes to the coffee experience, we explore it all because life's too short to drink bad coffee. Here we go.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Coffee Snobs podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really fun episode lined up. So episode 6, Coffee Beans and Roast 101. We're going to be doing a
good one.
Semi-deep dive into all things about the coffee bean.
6 episodes already.
It's crazy.
We have been knocking them out.
Yeah.
So
it's been a lot of fun.
welcome to our... if this is your first time listening or if you've listened to all 6, thanks again for joining us.
Yep.
My name's Tyler Dancy. I'm joined here with Aaron Beaver.
Yes.
Chad Lingafelt. We are the Coffee Snobs.
That's right.
If this is your first episode, which episode should they go back and listen to after this one?
Episode 2.
I would say 1 would probably... come on, AA Ron. You got to get the whole gamut. In episode 1, we do a brief introduction. But anyway, all the episodes are great. They're like your children. You all love them.
Do you have to
equally the most?
Well, I don't know.
Not the redheaded one.
Do you have to listen to them in order?
No, you don't.
I think you can.
You can go out of order.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So go to 2, then go back to 1, and then go to 3.
Or
Binge them all Netflix style. But, hopefully you're enjoying these episodes. You can listen to a
This
single
is probably a good podcast to listen to while you're running or walking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because we're highly caffeinated.
running to your coffee shop to get more caffeine.
That would be horrible. Who would run to a coffee shop?
I mean...
or around a coffee shop.
He's referring to a coffee run that me and Tyler did.
I'm sweating.
It was supposed to be 13 miles, and we hit every Not Just Coffee in Charlotte, but we made a wrong turn, and it turned into 17 and a half, and it was hot, and it was not fun.
Let's
stop talking.
So,
do you have a video of that? Or
Coffee
something?
Beans Roasting 101.
We're moving along rapidly.
We're rapid fire here today.
We
We're
are.
super caffeinated. But first, let's. What is new with you guys other than the caffeine intake? Aaron, what's new with you?
Well, we had a pour-over session in Louisville at the grand opening of Shiloh's. That was a lot of fun.
Cool. Who was that with? Or
That was with the grand opening of the coffee shop Shiloh's in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. A lot of fun. Had 9 cups of coffee that day.
Wow.
Was extremely caffeinated. Gosh, it was
more so than today.
Yeah, it was great.
Chad, what's new with you? What you drinking?
On the coffee front? Is that what we're talking about?
On the coffee front. Life in general? Whatever.
Life in general.
The other day, I got a new pair of shoes. I tried making cold brew at home.
Cool.
Based off of one of our episodes, which I don't remember which one it was.
Do tell.
I don't know what episode it was. What episode is cold brew?
I think that was 3.
Yeah, reference episode 3.
All right, but
anyway, edit that back. But I did that at home this weekend, and it was interesting. So I'll tell you what I did bad.
Yes.
Is I think I diluted it too much with water after the brew.
So your concentrate, you diluted that too much with. Okay.
I think so.
Did you mass dilute it, or did you just pour a little bit in and kind of?
So I made a lot of a mess and there may be another thing that I did bad too, because I didn't have any cheesecloth to filter it, but I just filtered it through. I'd read online that you could just do it through like a Chemex paper filter or something like that.
Can.
So that's what I did that, and then
it's just a really long process to do it that way.
Yeah, it's a lot slower, and it
does make a mess.
You can pour it on the counter and make a mess, and then I did that, and then I diluted. I took it in equal parts because I think it. I'm trying to remember now. I got like 16 ounces.
Yep.
After I filtered it, and then I took that and then broke that into 2 8-ounce, and then put 8 ounces of water with it. And I think that's where I think I got too much.
Yeah,
but I was reading a lot of the ratios, and a lot of people were saying 1-to-1 when you get into diluting the concentrate. But anyways, it was an experience. So I made notes of all of it, and I'll go back and try it again at a later time. Maybe with a different bean.
That's cool.
What about you, Tyler?
Always learning. What is new with me? Let's see here. I have got like 6 or 7 different coffee beans currently at my house, And it's really just a chore to try to enjoy so many different beans. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but seriously, I've got so many that I want to make something with this? But I got a new bag of coffee from Joe's Coffee, which is a roaster in Brooklyn, New York. I think they've been in the game for probably about 15 years now.
Joe?
Old Joe.
Old Joe.
Not Fat Joe, not the rapper to be. But no, I got that actually from Trade Coffee. I wish we were sponsored by Trade, but sadly we're not yet. So Joe's Coffee, it was just an espresso blend from their shop in Brooklyn. And I am generally a fan of like the medium roast, light to medium. This was a little bit darker, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
which that gets us into our topic for today.
Excellent segue. Just call me Segue Tyler.
Oh,
so today's main topic is...
That doesn't really flow, the Segue Tyler.
It really doesn't.
But his segue did.
Topic Tyler. Ha-ha! Coffee beans and roasting 101. So we're going to talk about three main things today related to the coffee bean. Coffee, where it is grown across the globe, how it is processed, which is how it's made into what we associate as coffee, and then how it's roasted. The coffee bean is roasted. So, Chad, do you want to start us off with that?
I can. It looks like you erased some of my... Oh, no, there it is. The sweet guitar riffs.
It's in there.
Sorry, I thought it got erased.
Nope, it didn't.
So we're talking about origin of where beans are growing.
Right.
Now, you can Google this and probably find a lot of different information, but to summarize it, a lot of people kind of categorize it into three different regions.
Okay.
You've got your Central America, your Africa, and Indonesia.
Okay.
Is kind of where, and it was interesting doing the research on it, is understanding, and I brought some beans in here to kind of see if it followed.
You can really see the beans through the airwaves, but...
So if you're listening to the podcast, you can go to YouTube and watch the actual full video. So
that's a great plug there. And reminder, all the episodes are also available on YouTube in the video format.
That's a great segue, Tyler.
Topic, Tyler.
I like segue Tyler better. But you were talking about beans, Chad.
Yes. So we use here at our home coffee shop at Lock Dock Security, Sugar Creek Coffee Roasters. It's a local roaster here, and not sponsored. # he brings us 10 pounds of coffee every other week, and we're on this cycle with him where he basically brings. We've kind of given him some flavor palettes that we like, medium roast, and he'll bring them in a variety of different origins, which has been really neat to be able to watch that, and then as doing some of this research on the different regions where they're growing, how that's played back in. So the bag that I have here is from Papua New Guinea, which I am not a geography expert, so I have no idea where that is. But according to this, it's cupping notes of baker's chocolate, grapefruit, raspberry, and toffee. So
yummy.
By some of the research that we're kind of going over, the Central America has more of a I think they call it a where's it at there? Latin America. Is it called Latin America or Central America?
I would start back right there. I would just say Central America.
Central, okay.
Or
I put Latin.
The coffee belt is like, there's certain latitudes.
They said around the equator.
Like that's the only regions on Earth.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
So start back. All right.
So kind of going back to those regions, your Central America, your Africa, and Indonesia, and basically coffee beans are grown right around the equator. So there's a region north and south of the equator that they're grown in. But anyway, as they were referring to it, the most of the Central America is going to have more of a sweet flavor to it.
Okay.
It's that it's going to have some sweet notes to it. And then when you move into the Africa flavor, it's going to be more of a they call a winey or a fruity note. So you're going to start seeing a lot of that, which is interesting. Again, somebody should probably Google where Papua New Guinea is. But this one says baker's chocolate.
Great show prep there, Chad.
Grapefruit, raspberry, and toffee. So it's got some fruity stuff, but it's also going to be more of the, I guess, some of the sweet as well.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, but
I will be happy to.
Are most of the coffees grown in Africa, aren't they typically grown at like higher elevations?
Yes.
Thank you, Aaron.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Papua New Guinea is going to be that is above Australia,
Top of the morning.
very close to Indonesia.
So it's going to be in the Indonesian range.
That's correct.
Okay. And so in the Indonesian range, they're saying it's going to be more nutty and woody.
Yep.
So Baker's chocolate, grapefruit, raspberry toffee, and then I have another one over here from, where does that one say? Cameroon?
Cameroon.
I'm going to guess that's in Africa, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And that's Baker's chocolate, molasses, blackberry, and floral.
Floral.
Okay. Floral. Like flowers?
Yep.
Flower.
So those are two kind of options there to show some of the different flavor profiles, some cupping notes come out of it. And then I also brought one counterculture bean in here, or their roast that's called Big Trouble. Now, their notes say caramel, nutty, and round, but they do not show the origin on here.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it's that is the blend, and it's in the upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand corner.
Yeah, on the back, actually, of the bag, appears this is an 80-20 blend.
Yeah.
80% are grown in Guatemala, which is a large growing region, and then 20% come from Colombia.
There you go.
Colombia.
Yeah, so
reading
a lot of counterculture, they have single origin bags, and with what you'll find in a lot of these areas is pairing two different beans to kind of pull out in your multi-blend beans instead of a single
blended
origin
bag.
Yeah, in your blended bag. There are definitely different textures and notes in different regions, but then you can dive in, and different even areas have elevation profiles.
Yeah.
So you got, like let's say it's Ethiopia and you got a high elevation farm versus low elevation farm. Like there are different, it gets crazy. That's the problem with this coffee beans and the information that we're bringing to you. You can, super deep dive and get crazy nerdy because we tell you one thing in an area, it could have the opposite because of a high profile or a high elevation profile to where a farm is. That's the crazy part about this.
And in hearing and listening to a lot of information on it, it is all about where it's being grown, elevation, all that, right? So they try to group these things into big regions and to big flavor profiles, but yet there is still a lot of variables in it. So it's just talking about the majority.
Yeah, and the flavor profiles, if you've ever had a chance to Google a tasting chart of profile, it is a coffee flavor profile chart, and literally it's a big color wheel, and so then you get like sours and what all the sours, and so then the actual terms are not necessarily the notes that you're looking for. It's they've honed down into and said, okay, if it's sour, now you've got a winey sour and then a sour, and then if it's in the sour category of the in soury, right? Then it has another one which is acidic. It's like the flavor profiles are crazy.
So this is when you get into a flip chart when you go in to order your coffee.
Well, this is where knowing what a little bit of those terms mean or they reference, because because it says nutty and woody, it doesn't mean that at all. It's actually referencing another term, and honestly, they're marketable terms.
Yeah.
It's somebody who's standing there and being like, "Ooh, I could do some nutty."
Well, if you've ever talked to a wine expert,
a sommelier,
this is the same way that they try to explain the flavor of wine.
Right.
Well, it has flavors like.
Right.
Correct.
And then, but if you don't have anything to reference that to, then you're talking Greek.
This brings up, that sounds on the verge of being super pretentious, because what if you're listening to this and you're like, almost snobbish even. I will say this, quick reference. I've seen all these notes on these tasting profiles on the bags of coffee I've been enjoying. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't honestly until pretty recently when I had a blend from Huckleberry Roasters out of Denver, Colorado, that I could truly, even in a latte, a milk-based drink, I could still taste actual fruity notes in my coffee. A lot of times in espressos you'll see chocolatey and nutty, and I might shake my head and say, yeah, I tasted that, but it's the same. I'm not a wine drinker either, but you hear about all these exotic terms, and do you want to sound dumb and like, I don't taste that? Is it because my palate is unrefined? I mean, I've seen videos on YouTube where whatever the equivalent of a wine sommelier is for a coffee expert, and they'll sit there and blind taste test McDonald's coffee and Dunkin' Donuts with these high-end coffees, and it's just kind of funny because sometimes they'll taste these notes that aren't really there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I think that's the refining of your palate. Honestly, once you start to taste, it's just like wine. I mean, you get boxed wine, like most people when they start, they can get boxed wine, right?
Yes.
And you're like, yeah.
Put it in the fridge.
And then like you get, this higher priced wine and you're like, oh, I can taste the difference.
Yep.
And I think just refining your palate, once you start trying a lot of different coffees, like Tyler has, he said he has, 6 bags right now? Like 6 different?
Yeah, 6 different kinds.
So what Tyler's doing is he's
That's a bit excessive.
refining his palate. Well, no, he'll now know, okay, I'm able to try this drink versus this drink, and I'm really able to see a difference at that moment. And then you can say, I like this one or I don't like this one, and then I like this region. Like for me, I've honed in, I love Ethiopian coffees. I do. I like a light roast Ethiopian, and for me, that's just, but I know there's a large variance in that.
Sure.
Just because I like this one Ethiopian, there's going to be different processes, which is leading us into the next topic, which is mine.
Aaron. That's great. So Chad, you briefly talked about the different growing regions of coffee. Mm-hmm. So in the coffee chain, getting to your doorstep, what's the next step after the coffee is grown?
Well, you have the process that yields the coffee bean. And so I want to stop real quick and explain that coffee bean comes from, does anybody know what it comes from?
I think I know.
Folgers.
It comes from a cherry.
In your cup?
A cherry.
A cherry?
A cherry.
Like the fruit cherry?
Like the fruit cherry.
Okay.
It comes from a ball, and to get the seed out is the process, and that's what we're calling like when they're getting the seed out, that's the process. So it's either
and the seed is the coffee bean.
The seed is the coffee bean.
Okay.
Correct. So that's where you're getting a lot of the fruit. When you get those tones and those notes and textures, that's where some of it's coming from, and it leads from the way that it's processed as well.
Yeah.
So you can get a different flavor by the way that it's processed.
So how do you process coffee, Aaron?
Well, what were we going to say, Chad?
I think it was a YouTube video the other day. They were talking about some of this and mentioned that it takes, is it 30 coffee beans to make your standard cup of coffee?
Yes. It's
10 ounces.
The actual
like
cherries. Yeah, like it takes it is a massive process. So you think, the fields have to be massive. Like currently at this moment, Puerto Rico with the storm that hit there, a good friend of mine, Joe, was just down there. He was actually at a coffee farm, and they have, they're only able to make very small amounts of coffee right now because of how much of the field was taken out. And even though they're able to yield, a large amount of coffee cherries, it still just takes a lot of cherries to produce enough coffee beans. Yeah. So we're going to dive into the different processes, and I'm going to start with just the kind of the general titles. So we've got natural, washed, and a honey, which is also a subsection of pulped natural. Okay, so you have washed, natural, pulped natural, and honey. Those are kind of two descriptors. Those are hybrids, okay. Correct. So I'm going to start with natural and kind of go through that so you can kind of understand. And I've got notes here, so if you're watching and you're seeing me look down, I want to reference because I don't want to sound like a moron because there's so much. Like I love this stuff and I geek out. And so our pre-show, the guys were like, look, you got to slow down because I love this stuff. So if it's natural, it could be labeled natural process. That could be how it's labeled on the bag. It could be called dried process. Okay. It could be called unwashed. Okay. So these are all the stuff that could be on the outside of the bag telling you how they got the coffee bean. And it could be natural sun-dried. And so this involves the cherry being laid out on a large area. If you Google it, you can see it being on massive asphalt tops where the cherries are laid out and sun-dried to large raised beds. to floating beds where they're literally floating nets where they lay the cherries on top. And this process normally takes 3 to 6 weeks for the cherry to dry out. Now, most roasters, they prefer the washed process because this is a lot more uncertain to how dry the bean is going to get. Yeah. So most roasters like 11% water content in the coffee bean when it comes to them. And so it's very hard when it's sitting out in the sun, and it requires a lot of work. So at night, they're covering all the coffee beans with a big tarp. If it's raining, they're covering it with a tarp. One cherry could be larger than another, so it's actually the way that it's decaying. Essentially, it's the outside of the cherry is fermenting off or rotting off. You'll never hear that terminology because it just
sounds gross.
Right? It sounds gross.
Fermenting,
but you'll hear fermenting a lot, and so but you can get a lot of flavor left in the bean, and to stay that way. So I personally like natural.
So let me make sure I got this correct, Aaron. So the coffee cherry is dried out in the sun. And then the cherry hull rots off, and the coffee bean is left. Okay.
Now, there is still a washed process that it goes on. So it's not just they're leaving it. They're making sure the coffee bean is clean. And there's different ways that they go about it, but just know the drying out process. All of these terminologies lead to how they get the seed and how it's dried. So they're just achieving the drying results. That's how. So the next is washed, and in this there are multiple ways that you wash the cherry as well. You have a machine wash where essentially they squeeze. With this, let me backtrack just a little bit. With this, most roasters like this because they can yield the most consistent coffee bean
from the washed process.
Because what happens is this is a lot more automated process. The cherry will be sorted by size, so that way when it goes into a batch, they know all the ripeness of this section, so then they can dry it to a certain ratio. They can yield the same amount of flavor from each. And so normally it is depulped, and that is the squeezing of the cherry to remove the 2 cherry coffee beans from the cherry. Okay, so they're squeezing the cherry to get the 2 beans out.
There's 2 beans in every cherry? Okay.
So with that, from that process, the depulping, then you've got the removing of the skin from it, which is a different process. So you have the squeezing that you can do, but you're also removing the skin, which then it goes into a wash. So there's 2 ways to do it. You can wash the extra part that is left on the seed from the depulping. Okay, so they squeeze it out. Not everything is removed from the coffee bean. So they put it in a big vat and ferment it with water to remove all of the excess off the bean. Or they do a wash process, is essentially like a washing machine.
Yeah.
And so they're getting a clean bean. And then they're starting the drying process. So the washed process is really depulping, getting the seeds out of the cherry, then either fermenting the cherry and rotting off the excess in a big tub, or a washing machine process.
And by far the most common practice is this.
Yes, it is, because it's the quickest. So the natural is 3 to 6 weeks to yield a coffee bean. This is like 17 hours.
So most beans that you're going to see on the shelf at a grocery store, you're not. It's going to be difficult to find a natural.
It is. It is.
Process.
Yeah. It is. You would think, and what I have not noticed a price gouge for natural versus washed. I would think that it would yield a higher price value.
There's more labor involved in the natural.
More labor, correct. But I think, because it's in as consistent, and somebody who is a roaster could possibly chime in, leave a comment if you know the details. But
we want to interview you.
I think it is just because they can control the data more on the washed, and they can yield a better a better bean, essentially, to the roaster, a more consistent bean. Let's say that, a more consistent bean. It may not be as flavorful, but that leads us to the honey. And this was the biggest
honey process.
The honey process. So when I was diving into this, when you hear the word honey, this goes back to the notes.
Winnie the Pooh. Likes honey.
You think they're like putting in a honey pot, right? Like you're like, okay, they're using honey. They're like pouring honey.
Always back to Disney, isn't it?
Exactly, always back. But
it has Disney Dancy. I thought you were Segway Dancy. Now you're Disney Dancy.
Call me Terry.
But so the honey process has nothing to do with honey.
Interesting.
It has to do with how the bean is sticky like honey in this process. So what happens is this is a blend between natural and washed. Okay, so what happens is they depulp the cherry, and whatever is left on the seed of the coffee bean when it is depulped, whenever it comes out of the cherry, then that goes to a drying rack. And if you've ever had any type of fruit, like let's say, for instance, a cherry, right? If you've like actually had it left on the counter and it's like after a while left out, it becomes sticky, or your kids have eaten fruit and then all of a sudden they're like sticky after a while because that has dried. That's what happens to this coffee bean when the fruit is left on it. It becomes very sticky. And so that's where that texturing happens, and that's why it's called honey processed. And so then that ferments off. You're able to get a little bit more flavor back on the bean, in the bean, and so it can be a little more flavor. You can get the blend of both, right? You can get both of the processes, but it does lend itself to a little more flavorful bean. You don't see this process a lot. Like you'll see natural and you'll see washed, but very rarely do I see honey processed or pulped natural processed. So
yeah, something I wasn't even really aware of until the past couple months.
Yeah, so I would be very interested. I don't even know if I've had a honey processed, but I'd be interested to see.
We got a guy. We could probably get some of that.
Well, hey, let's get it.
So you just gave a whole lot of information.
A lot of information.
Just from a summary standpoint, for those of us that are not as clued in as what you just said.
30-second wrap up.
30-second wrap up. You've got 3 different types of processing.
Yep. You've got natural. Think sun dried.
Right.
Okay.
Washed. Think washing machine.
Agitator.
Right.
Yep.
So it's just bleaching it off.
And then third one?
The honey is the blend of both of those. It's natural and washed.
And this is something that if you're more interested in the visual process of this, I know I've seen multiple YouTube videos because that's pretty much all I do is watch YouTube videos, and they have this entire process where people have gone to the coffee farms and actually seen and experienced those processes. So it'd be good to maybe link some of those.
Put some in the show notes.
Yeah, because it is actually a very interesting and unique process, and it makes you appreciate when you get those beans and you actually grind them and make coffee out of it. Everything that's happened up to that point.
Correct. And I think it helps you with your decision when you're standing at the aisle, or standing at a coffee shop and they say, hey, this is where the region is from, or this is how the process is. You can, I now go into a coffee shop and I'm like, hey, do you have anything natural? And if they do, I know.
That's what you want to go to.
That's what I
prefer.
Like. Right. And so same with Ethiopian. After I know the region and the notes or the tones that are coming from that area, I can help hone it in. Which now leads us to the last step, which is right before it comes to you, Tyler, is the roasting. Roast.
Yeah, and you could argue that the roasting's the most important, but I think how the beans are grown with care, how they're processed, and how they're roasted all play they're equally equally important to delivering a good coffee experience.
So drop that knowledge on us, Tyler.
Alrighty. So coffee roasting, when the bean is finished being processed, it comes to the roasters. It's called a green bean, not like the vegetable that your kids don't want to eat, but it's actually a coffee bean, but it's soft. It is green and it has not been exposed to heat at all, so it has little to no taste or flavor. So when the coffee bean is actually roasted, that's what's bringing out the flavor profiles, which are also partly due to how they were grown and processed. Yep. So the 4 most common roasts are light roast, medium roast, medium dark, and dark. We always want to go back to Starbucks. Starbucks introduced high quality, air quotes, coffee to the masses.
Yep.
Almost all Starbucks coffee, to my understanding, is a dark roast. It has a bold, strong flavor, which a lot of people enjoy, or they'll just associate, oh, that stuff's strong, so it's giving me a caffeine buzz. But the most common way of telling a roast is the color of the actual coffee bean. So, for instance, I'll hang my head in shame, I have bought coffee beans from Starbucks in the past, and they were really dark. And I was like, wow. And the bag of coffee beans that Chad is holding up is a medium roast, light to medium. They have a nice brown appearance. So let's just go through the different roasts. A light roast, the bean is going to be almost like a caramel color. The bean itself is not oily, so it's a dry-looking bean, and it's going to really have a lot of floral and or fruity notes because they haven't been roasted out of the bean. So that's the lightest roast. A medium roast is traditionally probably what we're most common to in America. When you see on the shelves breakfast blend, that's normally a medium roast. Obviously, it's a step up from a light roast. It's a brown bean. Still, you're not really getting any oil on the bean. From there, you go to a medium dark roast, which you're starting to get a darker brown color. The bean is not black. It's darker brown. You're starting to be able to see and feel oil on the coffee bean. Kind of bittersweet. That's when you're starting to get your bold flavors. And then dark, which is the bean will actually potentially look burnt or very, very dark brown or black, and it's very oily. So you'll open up a coffee bag and you can literally feel and see the oil on the bean. There is less acid in a dark roast, so that's why it has the heavy, strong flavor.
So a lighter roast will be a more acidic coffee drink, potentially?
Yes. I think the longer that the coffee bean is roasted, the higher temperature is exposed to. Again, you're drawing out the oils you're drawing out the oils, you're getting a less acidic taste. However, when it's roasted for a longer time, you're really getting a more strong taste. A lot of times you might see these terms French roast, Italian roast. Those are just dark roast, espresso roast. Those are all essentially just dark, oily beans.
Yeah, and that's why in an espresso, an Italian espresso drink is the crema comes out like so great because of the way that the oil is in the bean and how dark that roast is. If you get a real true espresso roast, it's going to be a dark bean. It may not be a super oily bean, but it has been roasted. If you've ever cracked open a bag of Starbucks, I honestly believe that they're putting oil in the bean, like in the bags, because my God, they're like
popcorn
oil. They're like screw your grinder
and
up.
It's horrible when somebody puts it in the grinder.
Seriously, I mean, it really deep down, and so yeah, but you get a really good crema in a dark Italian roast.
Yeah, so I would say one of probably the reasons I'm assuming that Starbucks does this is consistency. It can mask perhaps coffee that's not really as high quality, but you're covering up any imperfections when you have a darker roast. That's not to say that all dark roasts are bad necessarily, but they just give you more wiggle room. So a dark roast, espresso roast, that's what you often associate with all your espresso drinks. But what me personally I've found recently, a lot of these boutique coffee roasters are focusing on medium roast, and traditionally you would not make an espresso drink with a medium roast. You're going to use your dark roast. However, these medium roast are very well rounded. They taste good in a French press, in a pour over. or in an espresso. So traditionally, you're going to have a Starbucks latte, and it's going to taste really, really burnt, robust, whatever you want to call that term. But with what I've been enjoying is a medium roast made in an espresso form. So I'm still getting a lot of flavor, but it's in a strong, compact form.
Yeah, I think that's the evolution of the coffee drinking in America at what we're seeing is it's not that dark burnt anymore. I think these roasters that are popping up that are becoming super popular, it's allowing us to really taste something slightly different, which, is I am enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. So I know this has been a lot of data.
It is a lot of data. One last thing that I want to try to tag on there. The gentleman that runs the Sugar Creek Coffee Roasters, I've had a lot of conversations with him about roast, and he really talks a lot about the fact that each region has a preferred roast
method of roasting, right?
Yeah. So there are some regions that they prefer a darker roast. Sure. Some beans that will bring out the flavor in a darker roast. Some that bring out the flavor best in a lighter roast versus a medium roast. And so it's more about the origin, and that has a roasting preference, and that's where you're going to get your best flavor out of it. Versus he's like, if you have a custom roaster, they can do whatever. They can take a bean that has a preference for light roast, and they can put it as a medium or dark, and you can do that, but it's not going to get the best flavor out of it, which was very interesting. Like I didn't really understand that there were flavor profiles that had preference of the roast type. So it's very. There's a lot of variables in there, and this has been very informative for me. So hopefully you got something out of it.
Yeah, you can definitely deep dive into this and really go crazy with it, but I definitely hope that you've gotten some knowledge. I hope it helps you when you're standing at the counter or when you're standing at the aisle picking out your coffee. You can pick a better thing that suits decision. You.
I think that's a great segue because hopefully in some future episodes we are hoping to speak with some actual coffee roasters who know much more than we could ever learn or care to know about roasting. So hopefully we can maybe talk with the Sugar Creek guy. And
that's like 3 good segues this episode, Dancy.
I mean, he's segue Dancy.
It's so smooth. And I think, Aaron, you were saying you're going to hopefully be talking with the roasting guys at Sunnergross pretty soon.
Oh, that was we're going to keep this short because this has been a long episode, but man, did I get so much knowledge with the Sunnergross guys at...
And you've got a special episode with that coming up soon.
Yes. Cool. It's going to be really good.
So thanks again for listening. This has been episode 6, Coffee Beans and Roasting 101. We love your feedback. Please comment, like, email, do whatever. Reach out to us. Thanks so much for
the comments. They've been great.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button. If there are any topics that you would like to see us cover, please reach out. We would love to do that. So for now, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. Aaron, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
AARONBEAVER on Instagram. Aaron Beaver.
And you have a YouTube channel?
Yeah, I do. It's called The Suffer Club. The Suffer Club.
Chad, what about you?
lockdoc.net/connect.
Connect.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to make it simple. Keep it simple.
That's right.
Sounds good.
What about you, Dancy?
Dancy. On Instagram or the Twitters, Ty Dancy, TYDANCY. And you can reach out to us on the Coffee Snobs YouTube channel. We have Coffee Snobs Podcast on Instagram and Coffee Snobs NC on the Twitter. Twitter will not let me put Coffee Snobs Podcast. So on Twitter, once again, Coffee Snobs NC, Instagram, Coffee Snobs Podcast.
Gotta love Twitter.
Oh, Twitter.
The Twitter. All right.
It's been awesome. Very informative. Look forward to seeing you next time.
See you next time.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully we helped you take your coffee experience to the next level. Listen and watch with us every Monday as we explore everything coffee. You can find us on all major podcast platforms, and we would appreciate if you could subscribe and review on iTunes. Check out all of our video content on our YouTube channel, and you can connect with us by reaching out on social media and the web or YouTube. Thanks so much. We will see you again next time.